Assalamualaikum everyone. Welcome to the Candid Talks with Kashif Zubair. This is provided through MCOB. MCOB stands for Allied Muslim Chamber of Business, and it's a membership-based social enterprise with a mission to create a thriving Muslim business community. It's the power of collective wisdom, continual learning, and thought leadership brought together for Muslims by Muslims. Our core belief is that business leaders thrive when they have access to a supportive community of peers who challenge and inspire each other. Welcome to the very first Candid Talk show. Our guest today is Ahmed Fazil. Ahmed has experience of building three multi-billion dollar companies. Today, he'll be sharing with us his experiences and a blueprint on how you can build one. Welcome, Ahmed.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course, it's a pleasure. So let's start with going through your journey and how did you get to where you are today?
Well, I guess that goes back to London in the 60s. We were just regular, um say, upper working class, middle class families. My father was an immigrant to the UK, went to the UK with £5 in his pocket, didn't have a place to stay, didn't have a place to live. He just went there with a friend of his. They landed and they went to a cafe. In those days there was you'd land at Heathrow Airport and then go to a cafe, and there was a bunch of Pakistanis that used to work out there and hang out there, and he met with some people, and he told them that he'd just come from Pakistan with his friend Qayyum and Uncle Qayyum, and they were looking for a job, they were looking for a place to stay, and the community helped them. And after several years with help from the community, he was able to get a job and get his HND, which is his higher national diploma in tailoring, and he became a tailor, master tailor actually, and started making handmade suits for folks. Very successful business. Started up his own business, had his own factory, had his own clients, etc., etc. And then at the age of 6, unfortunately, he was involved in an accident, and that left my brother, who was 3 years older than me, in charge of the family, because my mother was your very traditional Pakistani mother. She didn't, she never paid the bills. She never did anything. She was just your traditional Pakistani. We were your traditional Pakistani family. And when my father had his accident, he spent the next 10 years in hospital. And what that taught me was, it taught me all about poverty, trust me, and the way that my mother worked to keep the family together, to feed the family. We were often times when, and I remember this, my brother used to bring me an egg and one slice of toast, and that was all we could afford. I didn't know that at the time. I was 6 years old. And he would say, "Why don't you eat?" And I'd say, "Well, yeah, I'm not hungry," or something. And I'd ask him, "Why don't you eat?" And he would say, "I've already eaten." And it was only years after that, I found that my brother, he didn't eat. We just didn't have enough money to buy food for all of us. So he would go hungry. My mother would go hungry, and they would feed me, and I would eat. But of course, I didn't realize that until I was much older. We went through life extremely poor, and that wasn't my mother's fault, wasn't anybody's fault. It's just the way it was, and we didn't have the things the other kids had. Always learned to, not have the same fashion that other people had. If they were wearing a good pair of shoes, I wasn't. And so that was the way that we were raised. And when I got to about 16, my dad was finally allowed home. He could come home, but he was left blind. He was left paralyzed. But his senses, his head, sharp as ever. And he was always able to give me some wisdom and teach me, although I don't think I truly appreciated him at that time. I appreciated him much more later. But you have to understand, from the age of 6 to the age of 16, I really had no interaction with, not for my mother trying, or for lack of my mother trying. She tried a lot. But you just don't get involved in what your parents want at that age, and got mixed up with the wrong crowd, and eventually decided that education was my future. I needed to focus on that. So I managed to get some O levels, managed to get some A levels, and then went into the military because we couldn't afford to pay for university. But while I was there, I got my HND in computer science, and which to people that don't know is probably equivalent of a degree. And was moved into the civil service. So I became a civil servant for the next, I think, 10 years. But really focused on the IT side. So by the time I left the service, I was pretty good with the IT side and got accepted into a company called Hoskins. And that's really when things started to change from, abject poverty to some semblance of having some disposable income. But throughout it all, my constants were my brother, my constants were my mother, and my father. And even though my father wasn't able to walk or get around, we'd push him around on his wheelchair. The one thing that always struck me about my father, always, he was 32, a behemoth of a man, big man. And it just struck me that, at the prime of his life, he was struck down in that accident and left the way he was. But never in my life, never did I hear him complain once, never. And so that kind of instilled in me a sense of discipline and a sense of acceptance that he had, simply because, every boy wants to emulate his father. I want to emulate my father. I think my father was the greatest man that ever lived. He was direct. He was honest. I never heard the man lose his temper except once, twice. He was measured. He was thoughtful. He was wise. I think that's the word that comes to mind. He was wise, and I love him and I miss him.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And how did it go from when you started your first journey on with the corporate world? How did it go after that?
Not very well. It did not go very well at all. They asked me to be a programmer, and so I went up through it because that was what my degree was in. So I thought, okay, I'll become a programmer, and started learning IT and started coding, but quickly realized came this close to getting fired, and because it wasn't very good. I wasn't very good at that, the lines and the coding and whatnot. So the other guys would always look at me and say, "What a loser! He doesn't know how to code. He doesn't know how to do this." Fortunately, I had a very, how can I say, not forgiving, but insightful boss. I had a very insightful boss. And the skills he saw in me were not the coding skills which everybody else had. The skills he saw in me were more, fortunately, the ability to lead. And, I think the training I had previously helped in that. And so what he did was he took a chance and said, look, I'm going to take you. I know you're close to being fired because you can't perform as a programmer. But what we're going to do is we're going to make you a project manager and see how you do as a project manager. And so I went in as a project manager, started learning systems analysis, whatnot. And that was the forte. And I was able to deliver some very, very large systems very, very quickly. The one that comes to mind is that the London waste management system. I used to manage that and redesigned it and help re-engineer it for London. And that led to me being directly headhunted and brought to the United States with the promise of a green card.
Okay. All right. And then, all right. So when you started on this journey of building these companies, the very first company that you've been that got to the multi-billion dollar in revenues and whatnot, how was that journey?
It was a strange journey, and it kind of reflects, my the differences in philosophy that I think I have compared to other people. The challenge was very simple. At the time, I was working for ABN AMRO, and I was responsible for all of the global IT strategy. And ABN AMRO was the third largest bank in the world, and I was in my mid 30s, and for someone of my age to have that level of position was quite remarkable, at least from what other people told me. I myself was just struggling to perform, so I never really looked at myself from the outside. For me, it was just a question of being able to survive at that level, and making sure that I was able to deliver the one thing that ABN AMRO had tasked me to do, which was to have a consistent IT infrastructure across the world, in Brazil, in America, in Europe, in Asia, et cetera, et cetera. So that was my main focus. And I really didn't think much around that. But being focused on that and working with all the various groups across the world, I ended up working with a gentleman called Stan Rhodes in ABN AMRO, who was the head of the mortgage group. He had started a business, a wholesale mortgage business that he took to the billions. And Stan was a former Vietnam helicopter pilot, and he'd always tell me about his tales in Vietnam. And I was very, very fortunate. For some reason, Stan took a liking to me and took me under his wing. I learned an awful lot from Stan. He taught me how to look at situations. He taught me how to look at people, look at long-term thinking, how to place and align my thinking with what was going on in the world, what data was important, how to cut out what data was not important. So, he taught me a lot of things around business that I just didn't know. And, but that was working with him to try and put the ABN AMRO mortgage group IT strategy together. And then, one day he just came up to me and he said, Ahmed, I have a problem. And I said, what's that? He said, everybody's building these. And you've got to remember, this was around about 1997, 98 era. So, he said, everybody's building these businesses online, mortgage businesses online. There's iown.com, eloan.com. And there was myriad, a plethora of these businesses. And so he asked me, he said, can you build one of these? And I just looked at him and said, Stan, I know nothing about the mortgage business. Nothing. Zero. I know nothing about a business. What do you want me to do? I've listened to you. I've tried to learn as much as I can for you, but I know nothing. This is, are you sure you want to give me this responsibility? And Stan just looked at me and said, look, you've got the one. I've tried doing it with people who had the business knowledge, and they couldn't do it. They just didn't know how to deliver a online-based business to me. They understand the business. So, you're the best technologist that I've seen in my area, given the needs. Not that I'm the smartest technologist that he's seen, but, for the needs that he had, he said, you've looked after the architecture for ABN AMRO. So I think that this, you could definitely build the architecture for this business. So I said, okay, if that's what you think, but where do I get the business knowledge? So he said, don't worry about that. I'll take care of it. And so for the next, I would say 3 months, I pretended to be a recruit that was going to process mortgages. And so one week he had me sitting on one desk, and, people would ask, who's this guy? And he'd say, oh, just a new recruit, just train him. And so I spent 3 months learning the mortgage process from start to finish, and nobody knew who I was. Nobody knew what I was going to do. Nobody knew nothing. They treated me like, some analyst, and they'd, go get the coffee, go do this, go do that. And so, that's what I did for 3 months. But it was an invaluable experience. It really taught me, not to the depth that I needed, or at least these other folks had. But it certainly gave me the overview that I needed to be able to say, okay, so from a business perspective, I need to do this and do this and do this. And then, if I build the technology around it, I can definitely find something to fix it. But, as in every business, as I was working, I didn't see a differentiator between our business and other businesses. There was just no differentiator at all. So as far as I was concerned, getting the mortgage business onto the internet was a waste of time, because why would people come to me and not to them? I mean, even not being a businessman, I understood that much. And so I thought hard about what I wanted to do. in terms of being able to differentiate ourselves. And what Stan said there is one thing that, we've been trying to deliver for God knows how many years. Nobody's ever been able to do it, at least not these guys. And that's why it takes them so much money to process a mortgage. In essence, what was happening, because of the disclosure situation with mortgages, what would happen is somebody would go online and they would apply for a mortgage. You'd have a bunch of disclosures going out. Then they would go through the process. They'd get a little bit through the process. And in the back end, because the complexity of being able to underwrite the various different forms of mortgages, they if they didn't qualify, that means they went back to the beginning. New disclosures issued because, you went from a 2-year to a 15-year fixed, as an example. And so, that was a whole new different set of parameters, different disclosures, different underwriting, different everything. So these guys were actually losing about $1,500 per mortgage. And their philosophy was, don't worry about that, we'll make it up in volume. So, it's the old adage of build it and they will come, which I don't ascribe to. I do not ascribe to the build it and they will come methodology, if I can help it. And so my thought was that I understand I have to build this system, but if I don't differentiate myself, then this is really just a waste of time and a waste of money. And so Stan gave me the idea, said, you know what, go do that one fee. And if you can do that, then we're differentiated from everybody else, because people will come in, they know exactly what they're going to pay. They know exactly what they're going to get. They know exactly when they're going to close, et cetera, et cetera. And the disclosures go out once and we've disclosed everything and nobody can complain. So I said, okay, we'll try and figure it out. And I said, but Stan, you've been trying to do this for years and nobody's been able to do it. He said, well, go off and try and do it. So, okay. So one day I was, he asked me to go down to Detroit. This was in Ann Arbor. The office was in Ann Arbor, and it was raining cats and dogs. It was just raining cats and dogs. And so I was driving and, I saw this sign on the expressway, and the sign said, lane is closed. So I said, okay, let me move to the next lane. So I moved to the next lane, drove a little bit more. And again, sign came up, lane is closed. Okay, moved over to the next lane, third lane. Drove along, so I hope this one doesn't shut, and it didn't shut. And then it dawned on me, it just clicked in my mind. The reason why these systems were so expensive was they were going through, oops, can't do it, go back, through, oops, can't do it, go back. And they were doing this again and again and again. And every time they'd get someplace where something happened and something went wrong, they'd have to go back to the beginning, issue the disclosure. So the cost of issuing a mortgage was 5x, 4x what you would normally have in a normal platform. But my epiphany was this. I saw 4 lanes going to 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I suddenly thought to myself, well, why do I need a mortgage platform that deals with 100% of the mortgages? If I look at the mortgage market, 50% of the mortgages issued on this in the United States are conforming products. That means they're, AA credit rating, 15 or 30-year fixed. Very easy products. Very easy to underwrite, very easy to build out. And so what other people were doing, they were spending hundreds of millions of dollars doing this, programming this looping thing. Whereas me, what I decided to do was put a note on the bottom of my website saying, if you're interested in a 15-year or a 30-year fixed, come to this website. If you want any other product, call 1-800 ABN AMRO usual mortgage call center. So that was my fix. And that way I eliminated 95% of all my cost, because I didn't have to keep going back. If they didn't qualify for a 15-year or 30-year fix, guess what? You're not going to use it. You're not qualifying for this engine anyway. So make a phone call and do that. So I built the same system as they did, except I was only focused on 2 products. But because those 2 products made 50% of the market, I was able to roll it out. We were able to capture the market. We were doing, within a year and a half, we were doing $7.5 billion in origination. And at that point, I got called when we rolled it out, and then the bonuses came around, and I didn't get a very big one. I was silly, and I didn't ask for stock in the mortgage company. So at the time, I thought I was doing it for education, and it certainly was a good education, but I didn't make any money off of it. And so I left and went to work for a fund called Evolution Global Partners, which was a Bain Capital Fund and the Kleiner Perkin Texas Pacific, which are the three premier private equity organizations in the world. And there we built built a couple of other businesses there that crossed that boundary. So that was my first foray into that environment. Now, I have to tell you that when I joined Evolution Global Partners and we built a couple of businesses, that was when the dot bomb hit in the 2000s. So, I went from living high on the hog to suddenly, boom, I lost everything. And so we were in a situation where I have this quote unquote very, very successful resume, but not able to pay my mortgage.
So, as you faced all those, any particular challenges or failures in your career that taught you valuable lessons that you employed throughout your rest of your career?
I have found that challenges always, at least the challenges I faced, typically, and I'm not saying always, but typically revolve around people. Because people set up your barriers. People set up when things are needed. People set up when deliverables are due. People set up deadlines. People are setting all of those. Now, sometimes those things are out of their control, but usually that's the way it goes. So really the challenge that I saw that I felt was most important to me was how to handle people, how to understand people, how to speak to people. Naturally, I'm an introvert. I'm an absolute introvert. If you talk to my wife and talk to my brother, talk to my family, they'll tell you, if I'm left to my own devices, I'll just not talk to anybody, go into my own head and think. That's just the way I am. But Alhamdulillah, God has given me the ability to turn that off, such that if I'm in a situation like this, I can override that. And that took a lot of training. It took a lot of thinking. Took a lot of things I had to accept about myself, because it's not very nice. When the question you asked me is my failures, and I'm going to get to that in a moment. It's not very nice to accept your failures as your own. And I found that the more I was willing to speak to other people, the more I was willing to communicate and exchange ideas and exchange essentially myself with other people, the more I had to accept my foibles, my shortcomings, because the way I see myself is not the way other people see me. And, if I screw up, I might think, hey, you know what, it was his fault. But other people assume, correct, no, Ahmed, it was your fault because you did this and you didn't take this into account and you didn't take that into account. So don't blame them. It's your fault. And to give people permission to speak to you like that is a very hard thing to do. But if you want to be successful and you don't allow that, you will never be successful. You have to allow that. And so that was my biggest challenge, overcoming the internal fear, the internal resistance to hearing my own shortcomings, because I didn't want to hear it.
Okay. All right.
Now, in terms of my failures,
Mm-hmm.
there have been some spectacular failures in my time. During the time I was building mortgage.com, they brought me on in ABN AMRO. And at that time, they asked me to put in a mortgage package for them as well, concurrently because I had to put in a mortgage package for the back end and the actual processing of the online system on the front end. I failed spectacularly on the package implementation. Part of that was the package. The package wasn't ready, but part of it was me. I didn't see that the package wasn't ready. I didn't do the analysis properly. And that taught me a great lesson. And the lesson I learned from there is this. There are some people who are good at detail. There are some people who are good at strategy. Understand your place and understand your position. I suck at detail. I thought I was good at detail, but I suck at detail. And what I did was I tried to hog the detail component. I thought, because I did my own analysis, I mean, even now I do my own spreadsheets, do my own presentations, my own PowerPoints, etc. So I thought, let me get into that kind of detail and I'll be successful. No, I wasn't. Because I was in the detail, I didn't lift my head up enough to see the strategy. And it's like the old adage, my airplane was definitely accelerating. Problem was it was losing altitude.
Okay. All right. You talked about a little bit related to people. So how do you build and cultivate high performing teams?
Um, that's a very difficult question to answer. And the reason why it's difficult is because there are as many answers as there are people. If you go into a situation where you have predefined, preconceived notions about how you're going to be successful or what you're going to do, you're going to fail. You're going to fail. My experience is, and I say that emphatically from my perspective, I'm not saying that applies to everybody. There are some people that possibly can do this. I can't. I am not that smart. So what I've had to do is, in terms of dealing with people, I've had to really look at how I interact with people. And I have changed from what I used to be, which was a situational manager, which was, I'd look at a situation and say, well, I need to do this, I need to do that, I need to blah, blah, blah. And you'd plan your way out and do things. But the problem excuse me, I forgot to turn this off. The fundamental problem that I had with that was the outcome was always different because the situations were always different. And that led to a bigger problem. And this only became apparent to me afterwards when I realized that situational management wasn't working for me, because what it did was it prevented my staff, and the importance of this is very, very, I can't overstate how important this is. But being a situational manager meant that my staff and my people, the ones that were, looking at me for leadership, could not predict how I was going to behave. And that was very confusing to them. What I found was that if I moved to principle-based decision-making and principle-based management, they would simply take my principles and apply it to the situation and say, well, he's going to do this because that's what his principles dictate.
Yep.
And so I had to define my interaction with people, and I came up with my quote-unquote HR strategy. My HR strategy is this: respect, respect, respect. Respect for your managers and your leaders. Respect for your subordinates and your employees. Respect for your customers and your suppliers. If you follow those three rules, just those three rules, your way of managing people and the way of leading people will happen by itself, because your principles force you to make these decisions. So even if I don't like the decision I'm making because it goes against, if I've got somebody I don't like, for example, I hate this guy, but he's right. If I'm a situational manager, I'm going to say to him, hey, you know what, you're an idiot. You don't know anything. You listen to me, and I'm going to, and darn it, you're going to do it this way. And that's what people do. But if you're a principle-driven manager, you're going to say, wait a minute, I have to hear this guy out because A, that's my principle. Number two, I have to evaluate what he says because B, that's my principle. And number three, I have to accept what he says if it makes logical sense and he has the data and he has the evidence to back it up. I might not like it, but I've got to do this. And so I give them that opportunity. I listen to them. And even if I'm 100% against what they want to do, but they make sense, but they show me that I'm wrong and they're right, I back down, because that's what my principles force me to do. So if you're a situational manager, in my opinion, I think the future is not very bright and people will not have a very high opinion of you because you keep changing. Nobody can predict you. Nobody can say Ahmed is going to do this or Ahmed is going to do this. Now, people know what my principles are. I've, like I said, my employee strategy is just those 3 words. My business strategy is just 2 rules my father taught me. My father taught me 2 rules in business. Rule number 1, never lie. Never lie. Now, you can be economical with the truth. You don't have to disclose everything.
Yep.
But never lie. Ever. There is no excuse for it, and you should never do it. Number 2, never be greedy. If you're greedy and everything is about you, then there's nothing in it for them. And if there's nothing in it for them, they're never going to help you become successful. And if you think you're going to be successful by yourself, because I remember this from, and I want to step back. You know, there's a, this was a big thing when President Obama was running for office. And one of the things was, you know, about how people lift themselves up by their bootstraps and work for themselves. Well, you know, one could argue I did that. I came from a very poor family. I didn't have a chance to go to university. I didn't go to Yale. I didn't go to Harvard. I didn't go to any of those places. You know, I went into the military because that was the only thing I knew that where I could get an education. When you know, when they moved me over to the civil service, I moved to the civil service without complaint because, again, I knew that this was where they were going to pay for my education. And so, you know, I can very, very seriously argue I did this. Me. I was successful. But that's a lie. It's an abject lie. Because I didn't do this by myself. I've had mentors that have spent hours telling me how to do things and how not to do things. I've had friends who have spent hours and days and months telling me what's flawed with my character and what's not flawed. Now, those friends were good friends because they told me the truth. My family does the same. My brother, for example, you know, first time I built a multi-billion-dollar business with mortgage.com, you know, he said to me, hey, listen, I'm very proud of you. You've shown me that you've definitely got the ability to do things by building businesses that other people can't. But when I tell you make tea, you goddamn make tea because I'm your older brother.
Yes. Yeah, that's definitely and I applaud you for that, for having that mindset that not whatever you are achieving, it's not because of you, but it's the environment that is feeding into you and making you successful.
Well, there's a very good reason for that, because if you accept that it's the environment that is making you, then you also accept that it's the environment that's making the people that work for you. So if you create the right environment, you can help them be successful. But if you're of the opinion that, you know what, I did this, I built this business, nobody helped me, nobody did a damn thing for me, blah, 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 I think that becomes very, it's sad really, because what people are doing is, through their own hubris, they're obstructing their own advances and their own successes. And this is such an easy thing to do conceptually, but it's an enormously difficult thing to do emotionally.
Yeah. So when you are building these teams, what qualities do you generally look for when you're hiring key executives, and how do you retain top talent?
If you follow the 3 rules that I gave you first, respect, 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 you will pay. And you know, the first thing I said was your bosses and your superiors, leave them aside. But the second one was your employees and your subordinates. If you respect them, you will pay them well, what they deserve. You will give them an environment where they can be successful. You will give them all of the facilities where they can be successful because you respect them. If you don't respect them, you won't give them any of that. And if you respect them, I have found people will respect you. Respect is earned. It is not demanded. And there are people who demand respect. Well, you don't demand respect by talking down to people. You don't demand respect by not trusting people. You don't get respect by telling people they're not as smart as you and they can't do the job that you do. And how do you do that? Well, you micromanage them. If you micromanage someone, what you're really doing is you're saying, I don't trust your judgment. That's what you're really saying to them. I don't trust your judgment. I trust mine above yours. And you, whatever you got in there, ain't good to me. But it's good enough to do the work. So I'm going to position you as someone who's subordinate to me, both socially, work-wise, intellectually. And what kind of message are you sending that person? Not a very good one.
Yep.
But if you truly respect people and you give them those things, what you find is that they will by themselves organize themselves. And what happens is they organize themselves into three, at least again, in my experience, in three distinct groups. Number one, your anchors. Who are the people that have the knowledge base to be the core of your team? They are the ones that are going to hold your team in place. They're not your leaders. Mm-hmm. They're not your visionaries. They just know the knowledge, and they are your subject matter experts that are going to keep you grounded to make sure that your business never strays one way or the other from the stated goals. The second type of people you're going to get are the natural leaders. They're going to rise to the top if you allow them, if you spot them, if you look for them. But again, if you go by the three rules, respect, 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 again, you will allow them to succeed. And they will point themselves out to you because they will do things like, they will say things like, let me do this for you. You know what? I'll do that for you. Not for motives in terms of control, because that you can see, I can see. I'm not an idiot. The one thing I want to say, I may be very, I just want to be clear on this, that by giving people this does not mean that you allow them to take advantage. That's not what I'm talking about. Because if they're taking advantage of you, they have no respect for you. And if they don't have respect for you, they're not following the three rules. Respect, 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 which means that you need to speak to them and say they're not part of your team. If they're not respecting you, they're not part of your team. Get rid of them. And that's the third category. The people who weigh you down, the naysayers. Get rid of them. And I'll tell you why you need to get rid of them. You need to get rid of them for two reasons. Number one, it holds your team back. You're not going to be successful. But number two, you owe it to them to put them in an environment where they're going to be successful. They're obviously not going to be successful with you. So why do you want to destroy their careers? They're going to go, maybe they'll be successful in another company doing other things. And then, you may need them. You may bump into them another time. And if they remember you as the jerk that threw them out on their ear when they needed you most because you disagreed with them or they disagreed with you, they're not going to have a very fond memory. But if you say to them, look, this isn't the organization for you, but I'm going to help you find the organization that is. That's a very different way they're going to look at you. So compassion is not about being soft. Compassion is not about being, some left-wing tree-hugging individual. Compassion is absolutely hardcore, hard-nosed capitalism that will make you a lot of money if you know how to use it.
Okay. All right. Well, on it, how do you manage risk when you are making strategic decisions? As even in a small business, and you are running multi-billion-dollar companies, how do you do risk management?
Again, a very, very difficult question. And the reason why I say it's a very difficult question is I'll go back to the first point that I made earlier, which is when you are looking at yourself, you've got to understand who you are, and you've got to accept who you are. I'm a big picture guy, like I told you. I'm not a details guy. But being a big picture guy gives me a different risk profile to somebody who's a details-oriented guy, who's going to have a very, very different risk profile to me. It was when I was a CIO, I'd have a very aggressive risk profile, but my boss, who was a CFO, at least in Thomson Reuters, was a CFO, and his risk profile was very different. He was very conservative, but my risk profile was not, which is why it's always a bad idea to have a CIO reporting to the CFO. They should be independent because they're two completely different risk profiles. And so the risk profile and how you manage risk is really dependent upon where you are and how you look at things. You know, if you're a details oriented guy, you're going to see different risks than if you're a strategy oriented guy. It's like Tip O'Neill once said in Congress, he was asked that there was some legislation going on, and forgive me for this example, but it's the most apt example. He was asked, about censorship and how pornography plays into censorship. And his answer was very famous. And I believe it's Tip O'Neill. He said, you know what, I don't know what censorship is. I don't know what pornography is, but I know it when I see it. And I will tell you the same thing. I don't know what risk is, but I know it when I see it. But that's my view. So what do I need? I need somebody who can recognize risk from the different levels of risk, whether it's execution risk, whether it's reputational risk, whether it's capital risk or whatever it is, whatever risk that you're trying to validate and assimilate or trying to incorporate, sorry, not assimilate. Whatever risk it is that you're trying to incorporate and trying to overcome and mitigate, you've got to understand that risk. And you're not going to be able to understand every risk that takes place. So from a strategic perspective, what I like to do is I like to have an end goal and say to the team, look, we are here. I want to get there. These are the risks that I see, and here they are. I'll lay them out for you. And you lay them out. Then you go back and you say, I'm not qualified to look at the detail risk underneath. So what I want you to do is help me build a work stream on this. And now I want to identify the risks on each one of those work streams. So even though I'm leading, what I'm doing is I'm allowing people who are more qualified than me to make the determined risk in specific examples. And then more importantly, once I understand the risks, then we can collectively come together and have a risk mitigation strategy.
Okay. All right. As you went through this journey, and I'm sure the person you were like 30 years ago was a different person than what you are today. How have you grown from like what habits and practices that you have developed for yourself over a period of time to become a successful entrepreneur?
Well, I take issue with your word successful. I take great issue with that, actually. And the reason I take issue with that is because it kind of defines success around money and achievement, in terms of what I've done. And I want to talk about this for the moment. And I think it's important that the definition of success, at least my definition of success, that I lay that out, because I do not determine success through money. Money's transient. It comes, it goes. You know what? I told you, I was in a position where, I was making, setting up multi-billion-dollar businesses, and yet immediately afterwards, I was in a position where, I couldn't even pay my mortgage. When I became sick, I couldn't pay my mortgage. So does that mean that when I didn't have money, I became unsuccessful? I would argue no. Mm-hmm. I would argue that those experiences taught me more about life and more about myself and more about my quote unquote friends than anything else. So, that they were critical in my becoming successful. So I had to come up with a new definition of success. And my definition of success is this: if you're doing what you're doing and you want to be doing it, you're successful. So if I take a housewife who's doing what she's doing, she wants to be a housewife, she's successful. If I take a street cleaner who cleans the street, but that's what he wants to do, he has no more aspirations, that's his aspiration, he's successful. Mm-hmm. But I can think of many CEOs, many multi-billionaires, multi-millionaires who are as unhappy and as unsuccessful in their lives as anything, because they have not yet understood that what it is that they want to do, and they're not doing it. So their definition, by my definition of success, a billionaire is unsuccessful, a street cleaner is successful. So mm-hmm. I take issue with your definition of success.
No, so yes, so that's definitely there, and I look at success the same way, the way you look at it, because at the end of the day, and to me, another element that comes a big role is that I see success as the success in the afterlife, and so my actions in this life have to make me have to prepare me for the afterlife. So if I'm successful in that, I know that I will be successful in this life. If I'm there are many people that I have come across who would be very successful in this life, and but they are not focused on the afterlife. They are just focused on this world. And so, how has your experiences changed you, or what specifically you have implemented in your life, the way the lens that you use?
Um, the way I've and I'm not successful at this. Please do not think that I'm successful at who I want to be. I don't believe I am. But really, for me, 30 years ago, I think I was an incredibly selfish individual. I think I was incredibly self-centered. I thought I was extraordinarily gifted. Hubris was up the wazoo. But there was one saving grace: curiosity. I was incredibly curious. Curious about what the world was like, curious about what life was like, curious about various things. And, reading about my pet projects are, reading about astronomy, physics, and all of those things. And then through that, the doorway into, religion, Islam, and how that impacts life. I spent a lot of years studying Islam, ilm al-hadith, ilm al-fiqh, ilm al-kalam. So, and I used to teach in the mosque in Des Plaines. I used to do adult classes there, and I've had the opportunity to speak to other people, primarily of other religions. But the way I took that, and I'm going to say this in front of many people, but for me, and I say this with Toba Safuralas because I don't want to say it the wrong way, but I want to get my point across, which is I have no interest in Islam as a religion. That to me is irrelevant. And anybody who focuses on that is really losing the focus of where it should be, which is we want the truth. Now, it just so happens that I believe that, the Islamic path is the true path, but that's the path I wanted to do. So when I used to debate people of the Christian or Hindu or whatever faith, one of the things I used to tell them, and it was remarkable, it was quite telling, the answer I used to get from this. I used to say to them, you know what, we're going to discuss this. And by the way, I never used to talk about Bible or anything like that. My discussions with them were purely related around logic, etc., and how logic is applied to the various components of their beliefs. But what I used to tell them was that if you can show me that your religion is right and mine is wrong, I will swear to you right now on my mother and my father, I will convert immediately. Will you convert if I prove you wrong? And you know that they would never agree, which showed me they had absolutely no interest in the truth. They just wanted to prove they were right and I was wrong. So what's the point of that discussion? Zero. So most of the time, whenever they talk to me, I'd say, but I don't understand why you want to debate me. All you want to do is tell me your opinion, because if you were truly interested in understanding and truly interested in being educated like I am, you would say, I'll become a Muslim, I'll become a Christian, I'll become a Hindu. Prove to me you're right. But if you're not willing to take that first step, that means that the whole purpose of this discussion is not to find out truth, but it's really for you to convert me to your religion, which I have no interest in.
Yes. That's definitely a good approach. When you are looking at this is your third venture, that is a multi-billion-dollar venture that you have set up, and you have exited from the other.
One point of correction, Kashif. The second business that was a multi-billion-dollar business, I was a CIO, so I was not the leader. So I can't claim credit for that second business. I was involved in it, but I can't claim credit for it. I can claim credit as a CIO, but not for the leadership.
All right. No, that's definitely true. But right now you are on the path of you're again You are already there. Your business is a multi-billion dollar company,
Yes,
and
it is.
so how do you, when you are establishing your business, do you ever think about your legacy and the impact your business would make?
Yes, 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 yes. I don't even know how much. Forgive me. I money and I are just not. I'm used to. I come from a background where I've just a middle class Joe, poor background, and suddenly to be ending up here, it's very very difficult. It's not as easy as people may think, and part of that is you've really got to do some things in terms of legacy. The most important aspect of my legacy, the most important aspect of my legacy. I don't care what people think of me. I don't care what people say about me. That is of no interest to me. Irrelevant. I don't care. So let me just set that aside. So my causes are my causes. And if people disagree with them, they disagree. If they don't disagree, great. Alhamdulillah, please join me, arms open. But if you disagree, I don't care what your opinion is. And, that may sound terribly arrogant, but it isn't really. And the reason why it's not arrogant from my perspective is because I truly believe that if I don't follow these processes, it's not a question of me being arrogant or whatever. It's a question of me being able to fulfill myself that the day that I'm lying down on my deathbed, I can say to myself, I did what I was supposed to do. So that's what's driving me, not what other people think. And my first priority of my legacy is my family. No exceptions, no apologies, nothing. That is my first priority, my family. And by my family, I mean my wife, my children, my brother, and both of them, Iftikhar and CD, and my children, and people that we've got that are close to me, my friends. So that's my first priority, to make sure that when I am gone, I don't mean to. I don't need to make them whatever, but at least that they are in a position where they are comfortable. So that's my first priority for my legacy. My second priority for my legacy is, I would say, my employees. To make sure that my employees are able to work well and achieve what their goals are in my company, such that we can do what we need to do. And again, one more clarification. Um, while I am the majority shareholder of my business, I do have three other partners who are very dear to me and deserve a lot of credit. So I want to make sure that that is said. That this isn't the Ahmed show. This is not that. And anybody who thinks that this is the Ahmed show, I think will be misdirected and misled, because it can't be the Ahmed show. But let's go back. So it's my employees, my partners, and everybody else. And then finally, third, the world. Um, I have a responsibility. There's that movie on TV, Spider-Man, where Spider-Man gets the powers, and he says, "With great power comes great responsibility." I never knew what that meant. I honestly did not know what that meant. I had an intellectual idea, but I had no idea what that meant. So when we formulated the business, one of the rules that I had in the business, and it's written into our operating agreement, was that zakat is 2.5%. So we've written into our operating agreement that the company will pay 2.5% of all its revenues, profits, as per totally complete compliance with zakat rules. And this was something I actually absolutely insisted on when we started the business. There was no compromise on this. So my business follows the zakat rules. We give zakat. However, that's the business, and that's what the business would do. Personally, my legacy, I don't know what that's going to be to the outside world. I am absolutely open to listening to projects that will benefit not just Muslims. I don't want to confine this to Muslims. Allah Ta'ala made Muslims and He made non-Muslims. And so my responsibility is to both. Because the zakat will take care of the Muslim side of it. That there's a little edge on that because we're taking care of that. But the rest of the stuff I do not want to confine to the Islamic world. However, if I look at the Islamic world, then what I see is that in terms of development, it's mostly the Islamic world, with the exception of the GCC countries that have not really developed themselves to the extent that they can. So one of the things that I'll definitely be looking at is how do we bring wealth, job opportunities, and security and stability to Muslims in Muslim Islamic countries, to non-Muslims in poor Christian countries, in other countries, in India, in Bangladesh, in a myriad of places, and to be able to assist people, regardless of who they are, where they come from, in the United States, in England, even in Europe, because you still got soup kitchens here. When the pandemic was around, I remember driving past a soup kitchen, and the line was 4 miles long. The car line was 4 miles long. This is in the United States, Chicago. So poverty is not poverty, and the things that does is not just related to India and Pakistan and other people. Poor people, somebody who's hungry doesn't care if he lives in Pakistan or if he lives in Chicago. They're hungry.
Mhm.
Somebody who can't feed their children doesn't care if they live in Africa or if they live in Brazil. They can't feed their children. And that emotional distress that causes, the anxiety that causes, if we can assist in that in some way, I think it is incumbent upon us to do that. And when I say us, I mean people that are in my position. And one of the things that I absolutely will be doing is I'll be reaching out to people who are similar to me. And I want to create, and I'm saying it here for the first time on your program, is that one of the goals that I have set for myself, and I will achieve, is a forum of people with the access to cash that someone like myself would have, and bring them together to create a forum of some kind where we can actually pool our money and impact the world globally. So that's a desire. How that manifests itself, I do not know, but it is something that's definitely in my mind right now.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for that. And we are coming up on an hour. So my last question to you is for the entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs. What advice would you give them who aim to build successful and impactful companies?
Number one, I think we were talking about this before. I said, don't emulate anybody. Do not emulate anyone. Don't say, I see Elon Musk, I want to be like, no, there is only one Elon Musk. There is only one Bill Gates. So, don't emulate them.
Mhm.
Define principles for yourselves. Define how you're going to run your business on a principle basis. Define what you want to do. Make sure you live by those principles. And those principles, when you are in front of everybody, it's great and easy to live with those principles. It's when you're alone in your head, when you know that you want to achieve this, but your principles won't allow it. That's when the principles become hard.
Mhm. Yeah, that's the integrity.
That's when you have to really do. And I don't know if I'm successful at it or not, but I think from my interactions with other people, I don't think you could ever say that I'm not direct and honest with them.
All right.
But I'm always nice about it.
Yes. Mhm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us your journey and how you got there and how you build yourself, how from the very start, like lessons that you learned from your dad and how they impacted you in your life and what I can imagine the 6-year-old that you were talking about when your father had the accident and your brother became the head of the family in a way. And learning from that, going through the cycle of poverty and getting to a level where you are right now, that you are not just working and impacting in the US, but you are a global citizen. You are operating worldwide at the moment, and inshallah, may Allah give you more success in achieving your goals and your objectives. So, thank you for being here with us today. I hope the discussions today inspire many more, and they put their lives forward in terms of making the principles and approaching life and their business based on the principles that they set aside, and be more impactful to the communities that we live in, be more impactful in terms of the legacies that we leave behind. And so, thank you again. Thank you for being here with us. And inshallah, looking forward to continue these conversations.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate you having me. It was an absolute honor to be selected as your first interview. I thank you for that. Although I don't know myself personally whether I deserve it. That's a whole separate question, but I appreciate your thinking of me that way. And I just like to say one thing to the audience, if I could,
Sure.
which is that right now is a difficult time in the world for us. We should state what we want to achieve and how we want the outcome to be. We should absolutely be very vocal about our support for other Muslims in the world. But don't forget, and I'll say this, we have to police and guard ourselves. So when you think about how you move and interact with the world, no matter what the subject is, no matter what the environment is, unless you have a base set of principles that you can use to guide what you say, what you do, what you think, it's like Lewis Carroll says, somebody who doesn't know where they're going, any road will do.
Yeah.
Think about where you're going.
Yes. No,
So
thank
thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you
Okay.
for being with MCOP. Our mission is to create a thriving Muslim business community, and inshallah, we are gonna go into the into our. Right now, we are operating in the US, but next year we are gonna go into your country, UK. And
Inshallah.
then Canada and Australia. So we are focused solely on Muslim entrepreneurs, helping them being more successful, taking their game to the next level wherever they are right now. And thank you for being part of this journey.
One more thing that I have to say this before we go. I am the man I am today because of my brother and my father.
Yes. Mhm. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.